Hello, Superboy Beyond fans. Welcome back to our podcast. Welcome back to one of our patented episode commentaries. This week we're doing a season 2 episode. This would be season 2, episode 5, Nightmare Island.
Yeah, not a great episode, but it is one that's a guilty pleasure episode for me, purely because, the guest star in this episode also played the character of Roland on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, who was one of the few sort of recurring enemies of Sabrina in that show. I think he returned every season for the first 6 years or something. He's one of those characters that if you watch that show, you love Roland. Everybody loves every fan of that show loves Roland. And so when I finally got my bootleg DVDs of this show, so many years after watching as many episodes as I could on reruns, watching it through, when I saw this episode and saw that he was the main guest star in it, I knew that this was going to be one of my favourite guilty pleasure episodes, no matter what the quality ended up being. And it is a pretty poor episode.
Phil Fondacaro, he is such a great actor, I think the first thing I ever saw him in was the 1980s movie Troll, where he plays.
Right. I've only seen Troll 2, which is the infamously terrible one.
Well, they're both infamously terrible.
Okay.
But
I mean, Troll 2 is the one that doesn't even have trolls in it; they're goblins.
Yeah. He plays this university professor who lives in the building with the family that just moved in, and he befriends the little girl, but we don't realize that he doesn't realize that it's not the little girl, it's the actual troll in her form. And he's at dinner with the family, and he says, when I was a kid and I was this size, I always wished that I could be like an elf or something, or a little, something from a fairy tale. And the troll turns him into one.
I need to watch Troll 1. The only reason I've seen Troll 2 is because they made a documentary about it called Best Worst Movie. And I think the guy that played, the kid from it is like the director of the documentary. Like, he goes back as a grown adult to interview the people, and it's one of the funniest documentaries about a bad movie I've ever seen, especially since there was a character that played sort of the town crazy person, and turns out the reason he was maybe the most convincing performance in the movie is because he was actually kind of crazy. And you see him being interviewed in this documentary, and the guy starts talking about how much he fucking hated that kid, and that he wanted to kill that kid, he wanted to strangle that kid, he wanted to torture that kid to death, not knowing that the guy interviewing him was that kid. He's literally the director of the documentary. It's a really funny thing. If you're a fan of bad B movies, check out Best Worst Movie. Before The Room was infamously the worst movie ever made, Troll 2 was that movie. And it's a pretty fantastic.
Before that, it was Plan 9 from Outer Space.
I still like Plan 9 from Outer Space. Maybe that's one I'll have to watch again at some point. I did go through a sort of Ed Wood phase for a little while, just purely because I saw the Tim Burton movie, and I was just like, I need to find out more about this filmmaker. Maybe we'll do an Ed Wood discussion at some point. I can't see it being anytime soon, though, to be honest. But anyway, Nightmare Island, Season 2, Episode 5. If this is your first time watching alongside us, you will not be hearing any audio from the episode. There will be a heavily filtered version of the episode that will appear on screen up there. That's just basically so you can keep in sync with us. You'll be able to tell if you're getting like wildly out of sync, and you'll be able to get back in time. But what we will do is just count you in with a 3, 2, 1 play, and as long as you hit play when we do, you'll be fine. So let's get going. Season 2, Episode 5, Nightmare Island. In 3, 2, 1, play. Don't talk about the intro. Don't talk about the intro. Although I do very much like this version of the intro, I must say.
Yeah, me too. I mean, as much as I like, John from season 1, imagine how much better season 2 would have been if it had been Gerard. I mean season 1.
Yeah. He was just a better actor, you know. I do think that John improved with every single episode that he had. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I don't know. You look at Countdown to Nowhere and that scene at NASA, I just think he's so wooden. You know, people make fun of Henry Cavill for giving a slightly wooden performance as Superman, but that's kind of just the way he was directed. I just don't think John, at least at first, was able to do anything else because he was so sort of green to the industry.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at some of the stuff he did later, and I'm talking post Superboy,
Mm.
he's really good. I
Yeah,
mean,
what's that? Is it the TV version of? Is it the Untouchables or something?
yes.
Yeah, I've heard he's really, really good in that. It's still a show that I need to check out at some point, but I've heard he's pretty good in it.
This one's
I
written.
don't think he was
Oh,
ever a poor actor. I just think he maybe needed a little bit more time early
yeah.
on.
Directed by David Nutter. Oh God, they're seeing the boat.
Mm.
I think he's a little over the top with the nerdiness in this episode, though.
Mm.
Lana's being a little bit snotty here.
A little bit, but I mean, if you were led to believe that you were going to get in a speedboat or something, or like just even some of the boats that are next to this boat, you'd be pretty annoyed. Especially since Andy's like wearing a captain's hat and stuff. Like he's he clearly was leading them to think it was going to be a slightly grander boat than it actually was,
Then
and it
again,
has immediately sunk.
yeah. Then again, it could just be a situation where he said we're getting a boat, and they assume that it's going to be.
True. One of the main complaints that I have about this episode is that Clark is slightly Urkel in it. I don't think he's as bad as he is in some other episodes.
Yeah, he's certainly not as bad in this one as he is in Superboy. Rest in peace.
No, but he's also got better episodes in season 2, so it's kind of in the middle. Is he not capable of carrying both at the same time? Like he could have Andy like jump on his back or something, and he could carry Lana.
Well, maybe it's a situation where he doesn't want to carry both of them, like that, because it's not safe.
Mm. I've got to say, Gerard sold that very well. Like you really do believe he's about to take off. I don't know. I think it would have been very easy for an actor to make it look like they're already putting their arms and hands like in front of them,
Yeah.
preparing to fall. he almost looked like he was willing to get hurt for that shot, which yeah.
Which we know he was.
I'm sure they had like a crash mat or something just under a layer of sand or something so that he would land cushioned, but yeah. Maybe not. Maybe they just figured the sand would be soft enough.
Yeah, I mean, he's not falling from 50 feet in the air. He's just
No.
falling from like 6 feet.
I just remember being a kid falling over and like landing on your front or even landing on your back and knocking the wind out of you.
I mean, Phil Fondacaro is definitely selling this character,
Mm.
even when
And
you
I
don't.
don't think it's badly shot as well. Like they're keeping him pretty mysterious at this point. I think maybe they're just trying to hide the fact that he's small at this point. You can kind of tell just because of how short his arms are, the shape of his hands, that sort of thing. But, you know, I appreciate that they tried. Maybe it's one of those episodes that if they'd had a couple of extra days just so they could, you know, shoot things a little more stylistically, maybe, might have been better. But there you go.
I think this episode has also the return of one of John's season 1 costumes.
It does. As soon as the costume gets ripped, they just swap it out for one of John's, which is something that always annoyed me a lot when I first was watching this episode because, yeah, I just get very strange when it comes to continuity and stuff. But, it is what it is. They did the same thing with Bizarro every now and then. He'd sometimes pop up in one of John's outfits. And it makes sense, you'd prefer to damage one that you're not going to use again. It's just a little bit irritating because now there's one less suit still surviving out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Then again, I don't know how these suits work. Maybe maybe they can swap out bits and pieces. Maybe they can remove the S from one and sew it onto a new tunic or whatever. If anybody watching worked on this show, and especially with the costume department, if you could let us know, maybe that would be fun. How did they not see that?
They're not looking up. And again, this is one of those episodes where Andy is, the voice of reason here, which is very rare.
Yeah, it didn't happen too often, did it? And yeah, because his tunic is ripped now, you can see it's one of John's costumes. But the suit was so similar that I doubt many people even noticed back then, especially with the size of TV screens. And I wonder if that's the same snake from Tiger Eye.
Or even the same one from the year before, Black Flamingo.
Could well be. They probably did just have, a company that they always called on when they needed an animal performer. It is weird, though, how Gerard just doesn't look right wearing John's version of the suit. It just feels wrong. I can't quite put my finger on why it
I think it's
irritates me
because we're
slightly.
so used to seeing him with the larger S.
Mm. You know, not one of the best episodes. You can tell they probably, with episodes like this, a lot of shows will have it where they'll, they spend a bit too much money. So they need to introduce a few episodes where they basically just run around the woods for an episode.
Yeah.
Like, tons of shows do things like that. And let's face it, independent films and student films, there's if you're in any class where there's a group of students making their own short films and that, there's going to be at least a few where it's basically just running around in the woods because it's easy and it's free.
Yeah. This is funny. He gives her a lizard and he says, "You don't like the food." And I can definitely see why he's acting the way he is. I mean, you find out throughout this that he's been here so long, he's just lonely.
Mm. Also, I appreciate the fact that they made him have ginger hair as well, so that when he sees Lana, it's like he sees a part of himself or something, or maybe he just wants to take her home to be his new queen or something. I don't know.
Well, he is talking about his mate, and his mate was also red haired.
Yeah,
So it's shades of Mr. Wagner from season one.
yeah. But I think the actor's doing the best he can with the material. I like the voice that he's doing. It's I don't know. Maybe in a 42-minute episode, it might get grating towards the end, but considering how little screen time he actually gets in the episode, really, I think it works perfectly.
Now we see why he stole Superboy's powers.
Hmm. Yeah. So he's a Mandalorian. I don't know. I just think he's delightful. I think he's always a fun actor whenever he shows up in anything. I always appreciate his performance. Just the right level of camp.
We got to bring Phil Fondacaro back for season 5.
Mm.
Maybe not as this character though.
We'll find something. With what Superboy just said, then, is the implication that the island itself is his ship?
I think so. Think about it. He's been here for several hundred years. Maybe there was a bit of an island there, and he crashed into it, and then just the way moss
Just
and stuff grows, it just grew over what was there.
Considering how many trees there are, though, it must have been way more than a few hundred years. I
Even
think
like,
maybe he's lost track of time and he's been there 1,000 years or something. Because trees don't grow that fast unless there's some technology in his ship that's accelerating the growth rate or something.
Or it's like what I said, that there was a small island there, he crashed into it, and then the rest of the island just grew over it
Mm.
and into it.
It is interesting that there are elements in this episode that are very similar to things introduced in Lost years and years later. And Lost did have some comic book connections, like Paul Dini wrote a few episodes in the first season. Maybe, I don't know, maybe somebody saw this episode at some point. J.J. Abrams is apparently a huge Superman fan, which is why he tried to make his own Superman movies so many times. Maybe he watched this show growing up. Although he would have had to have been in his 20s, I think.
Then again, I was almost 20 when I was watching this, so.
Yeah. Poor Lana. This episode isn't as bad as I remembered. It's not great, but there are much worse episodes.
Yeah, usually they're from season 1.
Although season 2 has its fair share of stinkers. One thing I do appreciate with this episode a lot, though, is just simply the fact that Superboy is really going through it in this episode. Like, he's in a lot of pain. Like, he had an arrow shot through his hand. Like, I like the fact that, there are episodes of Superman shows where he'll lose his powers, but he'll almost do everything the same way as if he had them. It's like it doesn't really affect him too much. Whereas with this episode, maybe it's the first time he's lost his powers, and yeah, he's not handling it well.
He's another one we ought to try and get on the show, Phil Fondacaro.
I'd love to get him on the show. I would have to ask him a few questions about Sabrina as well, but as I've said before, there's a lot of crossover with that show as well. Like Sherman Howard was in an episode, a bunch of directors from this, including David Grossman, directed a bunch of episodes of that show. And something I do really appreciate with the end of this episode is just the fact that, okay, they overpowered him and got him in a cell, but what really did it is talking to him. I appreciate that this is one of those ones where they were able to talk him round.
Look at that. Come here, step around this. You got shoes on?
And there goes the magic washing machine.
Yep.
I like that Superboy's story has a few holes just there. Like Superboy, when he showed up, said that the Coast Guard had notified him, but then at the end he says, "Oh, the Coast Guard must have got the message Clark sent," showing that he was lying at the beginning of the episode.
Well, he has to lie, you know.
Yeah, he has to do it a lot.
And nobody seems to realize that Clark was not with them the whole time.
Mm. And this is the most Urkel Clark of the whole episode. Although I do think the humour at least works for this scene, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of the time with Urkel Clark, it's just not funny at all. And I like that it shows that he doesn't give a shit about those shells at the end. Just a nice little bit of physical comedy, you know? Yeah, I like it. I like that episode. I'm sorry. It's a guilty pleasure episode, but I do like it.
I mean,
I know it's not a good one.
it's not a great one. It's an okay one. We'll just say.
I would say that this is maybe, the last one we did, which was Stand Up and Get Knocked Down, we gave a 6.75. I would say that this is about the same. Maybe 6.5. Actually, this is a worse episode than Stand Up and Get Knocked Down, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So maybe I'd give it a 6.5. How about you?
Probably about the same. I mean, what saves this episode is the performance by Phil Fondacaro. Even though you don't usually think of someone of his stature as being menacing, he is pretty menacing in it.
And I think he's even referred to himself as a warrior at one point.
Yeah.
So he's not necessarily who you would first think of for a part like that. Yeah, you totally. I mean, at least speaking for myself, I believe it. I wouldn't want to get in a fight with him.
Yeah, and especially when Andy and Superboy find all the corpses on the island. You realize.
I mean, just from the traps alone, like Superboy took an arrow through the hand.
Yeah,
like, he's clearly not messing around.
Yeah.
So I like it. I think he's a threatening character. I wish that maybe it had a couple more rewrites. I think that's the difference between this one and Stand Up and Get Knocked Down. I think Stand Up and Get Knocked Down could have been fixed with one more rewrite. This maybe would have needed 2 or 3.
Yeah, one, maybe 2 little polishes on Stand Up and Get Knocked Down. This really...
This is at least 2, maybe 3, maybe more.
Yeah.
There's a lot more work you would have to do on this episode. I think the only reason this episode works as well as it does is because of the central performance with Gerard. I think the stuff where he's dealing with the fact that he's lost his powers and the fact that he's also feeling pain for the first time, and not just that, but like he's getting seriously injured multiple times. I think that elevates the episode slightly above where it would have been, and obviously Phil Fondacaro. Is that it? Fondacaro. I can never remember how to pronounce it, but I think if you didn't have him in the guest starring role, I don't think this episode would have been nearly as good as it ended up being. I think it's just very much one of those things where if it wasn't for those 2 central performances, this episode wouldn't be a 6.5. This would be a 4.5 at best.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he does such a great... Both of them do such great jobs, selling what they're doing. I mean, just when Gerard gets hit with the rock.
Yeah, and he's
you can see the confusion on his face because this is the first time he's seen his own blood. Although technically, since he is the same Superboy from season 1, it's not.
I mean, Kryptonite Kills, didn't he bleed in that?
No, it was Revenge of the Alien when Peterson is doing the
Right.
tests. He uses the artificial kryptonite laser to cut him so he can get some
Mm.
some blood.
And it wouldn't even be the first time he's felt pain because, like we said, there has been the kryptonite thing. He did do that thing to get the blood. But also, I mean, Superboy was basically crippled in the season opener for season two. It's
Right.
like, he had to go to, like, what do they call it? The where they have to retrain you to use your
Rehab.
muscles, like physical rehabilitation or whatever they call it. And yeah, he goes through a lot in that episode. So it's
But he still had some of his power, just
yeah,
not enough. This, he was completely.
yeah. But I'm just saying, breaking your back to the point where you can't walk has got to be seriously painful. Like on a similar level to some of the stuff in this, like
Yeah.
that has got to be one of the worst places to break. Surely, like it's just one of those really, really bad places to injure your spine. But yeah, I don't know. This maybe if this was a slightly earlier episode showing how he deals with loss of his powers, maybe it would have worked slightly better. But I don't think that's necessarily the problem. I just think the script was just a little bit weak. Maybe they just needed a few more elements. Maybe they just needed some slightly more, I don't want to say ambitious, but just slightly more imaginative traps. You know, uh, he's basically just a load of like crossbows tied to trees and stuff like that.
And
Maybe
one snake.
one snake with there was the cage, but that's it.
The electrified door. That's.
Yeah, but he's an alien from another planet with a spaceship that's literally the island itself is formed around. He must have technology. Maybe he could have like set up like laser traps or something. I don't
Unless, of
know,
course, most of the technology has,
degraded or broken over time. Maybe yeah,
yeah. Because
it's
remember, he had to
possible.
steal Superboy's powers in order to power the ship.
True, true. I'm just saying there must have been something else. They must have been at a I'm guessing it's just a budgetary thing, but I would have just liked to have seen a few more traps.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have wanted them to go quite into like Saw territory, obviously, but
Right. What
something.
what what kind of brings it down for me is, Clark disappears at the beginning of the episode, and understandably he has to.
Mm.
But
Lana and TJ forget about him very quick.
yeah, what would have worked is if, you know, maybe there was a trap that Clark fell into, and you don't see him, but he's like in there, and he's like, I'll try and find my way out. I may be a
That
while.
would have been cool. Yeah, it could have been like, oh yeah, he's fallen into maybe there's like some cave tunnel systems or something under the island, and he's got to find his way out now because he can't climb back out. Obviously, it's an excuse, but that would have been a fun way to get rid of him. And you know, even they could have just if they had like a couple of more occasions where either Lana or not TJ, Lana or Andy say like, I wonder how Clark's doing on with all this. Like, where is Clark? Like, just have somebody say something to show that the characters haven't just forgotten that he exists.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
Also, he's watching. Isn't he watching Andy and Superboy on like essentially CCTV type thing at one point? Or did I just imagine
yeah,
that? Like maybe Lana's watching the thing, and you could just have like a little moment where she's looking on the screens to see where he's watching, and she could like be like, Clark's not on those screens. He doesn't know Clark's here. And maybe just a little bit where she's like happy that Clark has so far avoided capture. Just something like that, maybe.
yeah.
Little things here and there. It would have only been like a difference of maybe 10 seconds of actual screen time. Maybe Lana's whole thing could be like a voiceover, like a little internal monologue. Like, or she can just
Or
mutter it, whisper it to herself,
or
kind of
maybe
thing.
she says, "Where's Clark?"
Hmm. and have her looking at the screens, and
then
maybe you just see her breathe a sigh of relief, like, okay, Clark's not been captured yet, at least.
Yeah. But it also would lead us to the point where she might start to think, are they the same person?
Yeah, I don't know if I would have liked that so early on. I think by season 3, I think she was starting to work things out. But I don't know, maybe they could have done this. It's like, just the seed of an idea. And maybe it's just like the little thing that starts to get things working in her head. And you could have had this ongoing thing where she's constantly trying to prove that Clark and Superboy are the same person, like you had with the old Lois Lane storylines.
Yep, and the same thing which you had with the old Superboy stories, where Lana is constantly trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it would have been a fun ongoing story, I think. There's a whole bunch of ways that this episode could have gone. It's unfortunate that the episode isn't slightly better than it is, because I think it's kind of a waste of a good guest star, although I think he does just fine with the material that he's given.
Well, that just proves how much of a consummate professional Phil Fondacaro is.
Yeah.
You
I've never seen him in anything where he's disappointed, to be honest.
Yeah, it's kind of like the movie Snakes on a Plane. Okay, any other actor than Samuel L. Jackson would not have been able to pull that off. That movie is as good as it is, and it is a piece of garbage. I will not pull my punch on that.
It's fun though, isn't it? I'll tell you what, there's one actor that I think could have pulled it off, but it would have been a very different movie. Leslie Nielsen in Snakes on a Plane would have been fucking brilliant. You can't tell me otherwise.
I would not try to tell you otherwise.
Leslie Nielsen in Snakes on a Plane would have been gold. Can you just?
Was that done before or after he passed, that movie?
I don't know. Maybe it was around the same time. I thought Snakes on a Plane came out around the same time that he was in the Scary Movie sequels.
Yeah, and you would think that the Zucker brothers would have done something with him that references that movie.
Yeah, actually, no. I mean, maybe Scary Movie 4 or 5 they would have done. I think maybe Scary Movie 3 came out before it, and I don't think Leslie Nielsen returned for 4. But I think Scary Movie 3 is maybe the funniest one. I know it's not a popular opinion, but I like it because it's a Zucker Brothers movie.
Yeah.
And then, Superhero Movie came out a few years later, and he played the Uncle Ben role. Less said about the fact that movie stars Drake Bell, the better. But,
even though he is good in it, he's a horrible human being.
Horrible human being, but he does a good job in that movie. His performance is fine. And I think Superhero Movie is one of the few parody movies from that era that I think holds up, because they really worked hard on that one to emulate the Sam Raimi Spider-Man visuals and all of that. I thought they did a fantastic job. Kind of wish that had got a sequel, actually, but there you go. Really getting off topic now.
Right.
Just kind of happens, I would have loved to have seen Leslie Nielsen in this. I think Leslie Nielsen would have made a pretty fantastic version of Jor-El, to be honest. I like George Lazenby, but I don't know, just purely because he's got the white hair and he does look like Leslie Nielsen. I don't know, before his hair turned grey, I think he would have been a pretty decent Superman back in the days when he was a serious character actor.
Yeah, the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah, like Forbidden Planet era Leslie Nielsen would have been a pretty phenomenal Superman, I think. And then when his hair turns white, he would have been a great Jor-El. So,
No question there.
He's just one of those actors that I would happily watch him in so many things. Hell, I'd watch him as fucking Batman. And I don't think he's right for that part at all, but I would watch him in that role.
That's why I cast him for our season 5 run of of characters as the Alan Scott Green Lantern.
Which I think is going to be really cool. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to tune in again next week. Don't know what we're going to be watching next week. Possibly the Rebirth 2-parter. Just because we've been discussing maybe doing that one for a little while. So possibly we'll do that one next week. Or maybe we'll jump back into our Metallo Spotlight series, possibly. To do the People versus Metallo. That could be fun. We'll see. We'll see what we actually feel like next week.
Yep.
Anyway, be sure to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.